Good afternoon, friends. Stephen Ben-Nun here with Israeli News Live, and we are joined this afternoon with Chris Sky. Chris Sky, an amazing guy. I actually didn't not know much, Chris, about you to start with, but what I have been learning very rapidly already. I know you've been on with a lot of big names, even here more recently, Mike Adams, Stu Peters, and what really put you before our attention was your interview with Stu Peters for getting kicked out of the Reawaken tour. Michael Flynn, I'm probably not very high on their list of priorities any longer either, but we really appreciate you coming on. And for those of you down in the description below, we'll have the different links to Chris's works that he's doing. But he's really moving big in a I don't know if you'd call it, Chris, a foundation, what it is, but it's Save a Child, but it's on joinchrisnow.com. He also had to get a new Instagram, same thing. Is it joinchrisnow.com?
Just Join Chris Now on Instagram, and the website would be joinchrisnow.com, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But
sounds great. But we appreciate you. Thank you for coming on, Chris. And that interview I watched that you did with Stu Peters, not many people have the courage to come out and call what Israel is doing flat out. It's a genocide. I mean, I'm not afraid to say it. It is a genocide, regardless of what happened on October the 7th. We'll go into those details as well. But thank you for coming on with us.
yes, it's really ridiculous because this is basically their we call it in geopolitics a table flip. So the COVID agenda failed. They tried the climate change agenda on the heels of the COVID agenda. That failed even more miserably. So they briefly tried to reignite the COVID agenda. That blew up in their faces. So when all else fails, but you still need a crisis, cause a war. And what's the number one war that they know they could get away with because of years and years and years of propaganda from the media, from Hollywood, from school, from virtually every facet of Western civilization? Well, it's the Israeli-Palestine conflict. And they've been milking that conflict for more than 75 years now. And for people that they really want to muddy the waters on this, but it's pretty damn easy. As far back as early 1900s, World War I era, the Balfour Declaration was conceived. And they came up with this idea that they wanted to create an ethno-state where Israel is in present-day Palestine. And they were basically looking for an excuse to be able to implement it. Because you need something pretty drastic to basically be able to draft a resolution that says, hey, we're coming and we're taking half of this country and we're going to split it up and give half to Jewish people for a Jewish state called Israel and the other half for the people that are called Palestinians. And all you people that were living in that half of the land, well, too bad. You're going to have to move. So they needed something drastic. It didn't happen in World War I. But in World War II, thanks to the wonderful partnership between the Zionists, and we need to point that out because people go, what? Yes. What? Aren't Zionists Jews? No, Zionists are not Jews. Zionist is a political ideology, and the ones that claim to be Jewish are not really Jewish. They're Jewish converts, and they actually Jews. Before we get into the partnership, let's just get into where I'm not a biblical scholar or a scholar of religion by any means, but I know enough to know this. The Abrahamic religions are called Abrahamic because they come from a man named Abraham. And those three religions are Catholicism, Judaism, and Islam. And if we go back and the Jewish people claim that their genocide is justified because they had the land thousands and thousands of years ago in Israel. Okay, let's analyze this. Abraham, the father of all three religions, was from Iraq, modern day Iraq. He went to what is now Palestine and had two sons. One is called Jacob. Jacob is where the original tribes of Israel come from. Only problem for the Zionists that now occupy Israel. Abraham was obviously an Arab. So his son, Jacob, was also an Arab. So the original inhabitants of Palestine were like the ones that are there today. Arabs. They did not look like Benjamin Netanyahu, Polish, or the rest of Israel that's Ukrainian. If you notice, there's no white people anywhere in the Middle East. And there's a reason for that. We live, and our characteristics came what they are due to where we live geographically in the world. That is why different types of people exist, due to different climates and other conditions over thousands and thousands of years. So to believe that somehow these magical white people that are clearly from Europe somehow belong in the Middle East because they say they have a blood covenant to Abraham and Jacob is a complete fabrication. And it's only being used as a justification for this genocide. Furthermore, this is what people need to realize. Who are the biggest enemies of the Jews currently in the world today? Answer, it's the Zionists. The Zionists, especially the ones that pretend to be Jewish. And why is that? It's because they know they have no blood or birthright to Jacob or Abraham or the covenant of Judea. So they are jealous of the actual Jews. They would love to exterminate.
I want to throw something in. I'm going to throw something in there real quick, just a short one here that actually supports what you're saying. This is why Barry Chamish, when he wrote about the Yemenite children from the Yemenite Jews that came up from Yemen, there, I think it was 2,000 children go missing. 2,000, and to this day, the Israeli government has never been able to account or answer or give a justification to the mothers other than just say, oh, they died mysterious deaths. I'm sorry. We took them to the hospital. They all died mysterious deaths, which kind of makes me wonder. I mean, I should say this here. I wouldn't go along with, here today I heard on Al Jazeera, Gaza maybe would be willing to hand over their babies that are in the incubators to the Israelis to get them out of this war. I wouldn't hand over anything to Israel at this point, especially with their track record of the Yemenite children. Those children, according to Barry Chamish, ended up going to Europe. They were adopted in by Ashkenazi families to help in my opinion, it's just my opinion, they wanted to mix that bloodline into the Ashkenazi bloodline so they could get some Jewish DNA, real Jewish DNA going on for them.
That is a very, very probable and sound theory, and one needs to consider it. So moving on, that we now know why the Zionists, the Jews, we also know were funded by Zionists.
Yes.
And the banks that funded him and funded the British Empire, owned by the Rothschilds, were also very Zionist. We also know that Hitler partnered with another Zionist named Baron von Mittelstein, and in 1934, they even minted a commemorative coin that literally shows that and the Zionists were two sides of the same coin, a coin representing Baron von Mittelstein's pilgrimage to Palestine, where they now in World War II, after decades of having the Balfour Declaration on the shelf, were ready to use that they funded and initiated against the Jewish people. There could be no without Zionist money in the Nazi coffers, period. So and the Zionists worked together. The Zionists wanted the Jews out. The Zionists wanted the Jews. The Zionists wanted control, and they wanted to use the Jews as a reason for catastrophe to create Israel. And in 1948, it happened. Through UN resolution, the Balfour Declaration was implemented, and we all of a sudden, Palestine was split in two. And what did Israel immediately do? After being welcomed with open arms, there's literally boats of Israeli immigrants coming in, and they had written on the side of the boat, Germany took our homes, please don't shatter our dreams. And they were accepted with open arms into Palestine. And then they immediately turned around and launched a massive war. They try to call it the Arab-Israeli War, but in reality, every history book, even the United Nations website, calls it something else. The first Nakba. catastrophe in Arabic. And this is when over half of Palestinians were murdered or displaced from their homeland. And it was so egregious and it was so ridiculous that the same year, UN Resolution 194 was passed by a majority of member states at the time. I believe it was over 30 states that voted for this of the UN. And to this day, it's been in place for over 75 years. They even had a special event to commemorate the 75th anniversary earlier this year. And it clearly states that Palestinians have the right to return to their homes, return to their land, and be compensated for what they lost. Israel has been ignoring that resolution that is signed into law by the majority of the entire world for 75 years. And every year since then, they have been bombing, they have been raping, they have been pillaging, they have been taking over settlements, taking over homes, kicking people out or shooting them. Every single year, they have been charged with war crimes over 50 times at the United Nations and only avoided prosecution because the U.S. has veto power over the United Nations. So even if 90 countries vote against Israel, the U.S.'s single veto can override everything. And that is the only reason, combined with the massive propaganda from the last 7 decades, that has been able to keep Israel murdering and acting in blatant violation of international law and any type of moral human law with impunity. And it's only getting worse every single year. And they try to characterize this as self-defense. Number one, self-defense can only be from a position that's of weakness. You cannot be in a position of leverage, a position of power, a position of offense, and claim self-defense. Israel has Palestine surrounded. Israel has Palestinians in hostage. They have a blockade. They have an occupation. They have an apartheid state. They have an army, military, air force, navy. Palestine has homemade rockets. This is not a war. This is not a conflict. This is not self-defense. This is a genocide, plain and simple. They want to take over the entire country and either expel or murder the inhabitants. And they don't care which. They've killed more children in 1 month in Palestine than all the children that have died in the Ukrainian-Russian war of the last 2 years. Let that sink in. Yeah. And they want Gaza for multiple reasons. They don't just want it because they want to kill the Palestinians and take it over. They want it because they have something in mind called Greater Israel. Yeah. And Greater Israel means that the Zionists want to expand the borders and the geopolitical standing of Israel into Jordan, Syria, Egypt, and Lebanon. And that is why Israel has also been bombing these countries over the last few weeks, once again, out of self-defense. When you listen to the propaganda that's pro-Israeli on the TV, it doesn't matter who they bomb. All they have to use is a trigger word to reprogram your thoughts and circumvent your thinking, and then provide you a justification. What do I mean by that? Oh, when Israel bombs Palestine, they're never bombing Palestine. They're bombing Hamas. And if they killed innocent civilians, even if they were bombing hospitals, oh, no, Hamas was using those people as human shields. So now it's completely justified. When they bomb Lebanon, they're not bombing Lebanon. They're bombing Hezbollah. So it's okay because everybody knows Hezbollah are terrorists. So anything that Israel does is okay. When they bombed Syria and Aleppo at the airport, oh, they weren't bombing Syria. They were bombing Iranian-backed militants. So now it's okay.
Let me jump in here real quick. I want to hit a couple of things here and then get your take on some of these, but also to strengthen a lot of what you're saying there. One, I'm going to mention real quick. I don't know if you're aware of this or not. The defense minister of Israel said today that warned Hezbollah if they get in a confrontation with them, the civilians are going to pay the price. Interesting, right? Secondly, I'm going to back up just a little bit because as you were mentioning some other issues there. I wanted to bring out, like in the case of going back to Germany, how that the Zionists were funding them, etc. I don't know if you're familiar with the book Victims Accused, written by Rabbi Schoenfeld. A lot of the rabbis that did go through the Holocaust came out and condemned the Jewish Zionists for their obvious complicit dealings with the German government. And one of the things that when they brought this to trial after the war, it was brought out. They had the Jewish World Congress from Switzerland on trial there, and they said, why didn't you rescue? We had it worked out to rescue some 800,000 Jews from Hungary going to Auschwitz, but instead you wouldn't pay the price, $15 a head. They got sent to Auschwitz instead. And their answer was, we could not have a Jewish state unless we have Jewish blood in order to create a Jewish state. Now, my thought is they can't have a new world order and Israel be the head of that new world order, because the Talmudic Zionists of today, they believe that Israel, the law is going to come out of Jerusalem. So they believe they have to be the head of the new world order. I believe personally and very strongly, going all the way back to unsettling of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, you name it, this was all done in order to, and I said this 6 years ago when all the refugees were coming into Western Europe, I said, Israel has done this intentionally in order to set up something. At the time, I wasn't quite sure what it was. And then I started picking up on it more so not too long ago. I said, this is part of the New World Order agenda, especially when they started the war against Gaza here, and they were relentlessly bombing the civilians, and they're not backing down. Why? They want the Arabs that have been forced into all these European countries, the United States, Canada, etc., to come together, cause an attack on more Jews, more Zionist Christians, so that they can justify martial law, lock these countries down, and then declare their new world order, and allow even the people that are living in Israel now, they don't care if they bomb them, they don't care if the people of Hezbollah, and ultimately even the people of Syria, even though all the matriarchs, as you pointed out about Abraham, he's from Iraq, but the matriarchs, they're all Syrians. And Laban made a covenant between Jacob and himself never to cross over these rocks there, that's right over there in modern state northern Jordan now, never to cross these to do each other harm. So my argument has always been, when you're bombing Syria, you're bombing your cousins. You know, when you're bombing Lebanon, and let's face it, Palestinians, you know, probably 50% of them, and Ben Gurion knew this, are Jewish descent from the 2,000 years ago when the Romans came in there and destroyed everything and drove them out because of their own faults that they did. You know, so at the end of the day, the problem is, I think Israel, every bit of this is strategic moves, and I think that's why they want the civilian deaths. And then, of course, and this is what I wanted to really get your thoughts on as well, Chris, is on October the 7th, there's too much evidence that I have. I've worked intelligence community many years ago.
I already know what you're going to say.
Yeah,
I already know what you're going to say. I already agree with you wholeheartedly. Let's analyze this for a second. Besides the fact that everything you just said is 100% true. They're fomenting all this thing. They're going after the civilians because they want to rile up Arabs all over the world. And if that doesn't work, I already guarantee you, the guy is planning false all over the United States to make sure that Americans remember who to hate and want to go to war for Israel. 100% guaranteed. Guys working in overdrive. Now, who are the number one perpetrators of flags in the history of mankind? What is their actual military and intelligence operative motto? Through deception, thou shalt make war. They tell you it is their official policy to lie to you. Now let's analyze their geopolitical situation. They have the most sophisticatedly monitored, most robustly defended border that exists in humankind today. It's patrolled by drones at high altitude, patrolled by drones at low altitude. They have cameras everywhere with machine guns mounted on the walls. They have patrol units on foot, patrol units on the ground. And we're supposed to believe that this army, infiltrators of Hamas, got on paragliders, which are basically parachutes that go around 30 miles an hour. And you can see them from a gazillion miles away. They're literally sitting ducks that can be picked off with a double barrel shotgun. You don't even need a military weapon for them. But we're supposed to believe that this group of fighters penetrated the most well-guarded, well-monitored border in history of mankind and had 7 hours of impunity. Meanwhile, we already have footage leaked from all over the world directly from the Israeli Apache attack helicopters who indiscriminately bombed and destroyed so many cars with Israelis inside, burned them alive, burnt them to a crisp, burnt them beyond recognition. Why? Because Zionists love sacrifice for their political ends. And if I was wrong about this, there wouldn't be massive protests in Israel right now where they couldn't even hold back the protesters from Benjamin Netanyahu's house. And these were Israeli Jews, and they were chanting jail and murderer. Now, why would they be saying those two things? Because they know that he allowed this flag on October 7th to happen, and he even aided and abetted it, killing a whole bunch of Israelis to make sure it would be catastrophic enough to launch this assault that you're seeing now. And they want a much larger war. Why? Because they see the geopolitical aspect of it. There's only a few million Israelis and even fewer Zionists. But how many Americans, how many Iranians, how many Russians? They want a regional war where everybody fights over them. And they're going to hide behind America and spare as many of the Zionist lives as possible. People like Netanyahu and his Zionist friends are not going to be part of the normal Israeli population taking refuge in bomb shelters. And those bomb shelters aren't going to do any good against Iranian cruise missiles like they do against friggin' Gazan rockets that are homemade. So they're going really to sacrifice as many as it takes in Israel to get a larger war going, because even if they sacrifice 3 million Israelis, but they can get hundreds of millions of Americans and everybody else to kill each other, the Zionists see it as a massive win. That's all they care about. Death, destruction, so they can get more power, more geopolitical control, all the while playing the victim, all the while playing the possum. These are the most people in the history of mankind, and they're finally being exposed. We have protests going on all over the world. Colombia just announced yesterday that they are formally charging Benjamin Netanyahu with war crimes. Algeria claims they want to do the same thing, and a bunch of other countries like Turkey are following suit. Pretty soon, it's going to be the whole world against Netanyahu. And guess what? They already ordered a ceasefire at the UN. It was already overwhelmingly voted in favor of. But guess what happened? The U.S. vetoed it. So the U.S. is 100% complicit in trying to create this war. And it's not because the U.S. is that dumb. It's because the U.S. is controlled by Zionists. And those Zionists have no problem sacrificing stupid Americans, and even less problem making Americans spend trillions of dollars and going into the debt to the Zionist banks that control them. People in America have very short memories. They remember something called the American Revolution, where they had to fight King George's army tooth and nail for their independence. But they forgot that King George is funded by the same people that have now infiltrated their government and now control their politicians and control their banking system. And why did they do that? Because they realized America could not be taken over with invasions and guns and bullets. So they have to be infiltrated and use their traitors and take it down from the inside. That is why they want to drag America into a war they know they can't win. Let me say that again. Americans, with all your hustle and bustle, you will get absolutely obliterated if you try to fight Israel's war in the Middle East, because you will end up going up against Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Russia, China. You think China's just going to sit by? They're going to see that as the best opportunity to come and push the U.S. right off the cliff. In fact, China already removed Israel from all their maps. Did you know that? China has already removed Israel from the maps in all of Chinese literature. So they already see where this is going. Everybody sees where this is going. The Zionists bit off way more than they could chew. This was an act of desperation. If you look at the attack of 9/11, you can tell that was very well planned. It took months or even years of planning. Working with the U.S. Zionist factions of the U.S. government, working with private citizens like Larry Silverstein, working with insurance companies. It was a huge, huge deal. And it took years to unravel the truth, even after it was so obvious, because 3 buildings fell down from 2 airplanes. It made absolutely no sense. But you can tell that this latest flag on October 7th was something that they just threw together out of desperation. They needed a trigger, they needed a distraction, and they came up with it. And that's why the truth is coming out about it within a few days. That's why we already have helicopter pilots from Israel testifying that they were shooting Israelis because they couldn't even tell the difference. So this is not as organized or planned as their other endeavors. And that is why they lost control of the narrative so quick. Never before in human history has the media had to backpedal. We saw the media going 24 hours a day warmongering, and we saw every friggin' leader around the world that they would put on TV calling for war. Now all of a sudden, Justin Trudeau is calling for a ceasefire. Then he backpedaled. Even Macron in France is calling for a ceasefire. So it's not because they stopped supporting the Zionists. It's because we are getting the message out, and billions, not even millions, billions of people around the world now realize that there's a big difference between Zionists and Jews. And they now realize that Zionists are the ones that are causing all the problems in the Middle East. Zionists are the ones that have funded both sides of every war and every government-funded atrocity in the last few hundred years. What is the number one cause of death right now? You know what it is? It's democide. Democide is governments killing their own people. And when have governments killed their own people? It's always when Zionist communism gets installed and they murder a whole bunch of their people. It happened in China. It happened in Russia. It happened in Cambodia. It happened in Turkey. It happened in Germany. Like, need we go on? It is the same friggin' pattern over and over and over again. And it always leads to death, destruction, mass murder, and these people coming out and playing the victim, even though they just got way more money, way more power, and increased their geopolitical position every single time. These people do not think in terms of days, weeks, or months. They think in terms of decades. They pass their knowledge and their power on in a dynasty. So they think in terms of generations. They plan that far ahead. When people say the expression, you're playing checkers, they're playing chess, it couldn't be any more accurate and even literal in this case, because people literally don't even understand the game that's being played against them, and these people are already 5 moves ahead. That's the situation we're in, but it's changing rapidly. Everyone around the world realizes Israel is not the victim. Israel is the aggressor, but they also realize that the Israeli people are overwhelmingly starting to realize that the Zionists are the problem for the Jews, for the Arabs, for the Christians, for virtually everybody in the region.
Secondly, I want to say this. When you see people like Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis in their presidential debate, and I don't even know who the other guy was, all of them cheering on the war to kill all these babies in Gaza. The reason why they do this, and I know this from my inside connections up in Washington, is because they have dirt on every one of these politicians. If they want to, they have to say whatever Israel is going to say. Two reasons. One, that's where their money comes from. Like I learned from Lori Cardozo-Moore years ago. She left my house after one Shabbat evening, and she goes, this is when I was pro-Zionist, goes to Miami. And I said, why are you going to Miami? She said, that's where the money comes from, the Jewish donors. Same thing. Cynthia McKinney, good friend of ours, former Congresswoman. You've got her. You've got, James Traficant, former congressman, mysteriously dies. But they were bold enough to speak out about how that Israel owns, James Traficant says Israel owned Congress and the Senate. And as I was told from intelligence, it's because they have, if they don't got you with money, they got you because your wife, or they got video footage of you. Almost every single politician there is, they got dirt on them somewhere. So they are controlling, and it's not just America, that's Europe, you name it.
Well, in America, it's worse than everywhere, because people have to understand that the most powerful lobby in American politics is AIPAC, American Israeli Public Action Committee. And in fact, they have so much authority over the American government. Number one, it's legal for dual citizens, Israelis, to be in the American government. Imagine a dual citizen U.S. Russian or U.S. Chinese or U.S. North Korean or U.S. Iranian. They would actually be laughed out of Congress or the Senate. But when it's a dual citizen with Israeli, oh, bow down. They're obviously there for the good of the United States, because, you know, you can always serve two masters. And in fact, when you look at the heads of the CDC and you look at everybody who was responsible for the lockdowns and the mandates and the restrictions and the closing of people's businesses and the destruction of people's livelihoods, they were all dual citizen Israelis. Occupying high-level positions in U.S. government and U.S. healthcare. But AIPAC actually forces every single incumbent, senator, congressman, etc., to sign a pledge of allegiance to put Israel first before America. Meanwhile, you have someone like Donald Trump claiming his slogan is America first, and then he's off to Israel with his yarmulke, touching the wall, because his number one donor was Sheldon Adelson, a Zionist Israeli dual citizen who's now dead, but he was one of the largest contributors to Trump when Trump was virtually bankrupt. And that's why Trump was just on TV the other day stating, we will back Israel without qualification. So basically, no matter what Israel does, they can openly. In fact, Israel's platoon sergeant, one of them from the IDF, even had wonderful shirts made and given to his unit that depicted Israeli IDF soldiers shooting pregnant Palestinian women in the stomach with the caption, "One shot, 2 kills." And this was officially sanctioned by a platoon sergeant, in the IDF. And when it was found out, they pretended like it was just a joke. And not one person was disciplined for these actions. This is what we're fighting against right now. We are fighting against satanic people that lie about every single thing they say. Evil people that accuse their opposition of everything they themselves are doing. Evil people that will play the victim while they're stabbing you in the back. And they're doing it to the Jewish people first and foremost. Who you think is going to be the first casualty of war if Israel keeps bombing Palestine and bombing their neighbors? Who do you think? It's going to be the Israeli people. And they want that. Because if they can get 1 million or 2 Israelis killed, they're that much closer to their Jacob birthright. And they got all that new blood and all that new sympathy for them to hide behind so they can commit even more atrocities. That's what they are trying to do.